onto creating the next section for this web page of ours that goes beneath the hero section, let's go over to our code editor to start our markup from the HTML side of things. This is the first section with a class name of hero. Now we have to create the next section. Let's give it a class of about, section.about. We want the section to have two divs, we want this section to have two divs. One div will serve as the image box and the other div will serve as a content box. This is how it goes. Div with a class name of imgbx, that's image box. Let's just a class name. You can decide to spell the image in full and the box in full, whatever does it for you, as long as you remember the class names you used when you go over to the CSS side of things. All right, now another div with a class name of content box. Good, here we go. If you go over to our browser, we would see a dark. Going over to the browser, you will see a dark on the browser. Now you'll see a dark portion on the screen right beneath the hero section, but we've not given any style to our about section or to these divs right here. How come we have this dark portion? This is because these divs are inheriting declaration or inheriting their styles from this guy right here. Remember earlier when we were styling the CSS? Remember earlier when we were styling the hero section, we gave the div some declarations, which involves a background color of black and an opacity of 75%. That is what is reflecting here. Because we use the selector called div, these declarations will apply to each and every div on the web page. So since we have a div here and a div here, the two of them are what you're seeing right here. To prove that to you, let's go over and make this div have its own declaration. Let's go over and get to make this div stand on its own by giving it the selector .hero space div. .hero space div means the div inside the hero section. Remember the class name is hero. The div inside of the hero section is the only div that will have these declarations. It will not affect these divs anymore because these divs are not inside of the hero section. They are in a section of their own, which is the about section. We'll go over to our web page now. You see that black or dark portion is gone. Having isolated the div in the hero section by tagging this .hero to it, which means the div inside of the hero section, our divs here in the about section, they have no styling yet. Let's go over and style them. Would give them the selector .about div, which means any div inside of the about section. Let's give them a height of 350 pixels, and to make it visible for now, let's give it a border of 2 pixels, solid salmon. Go over to our web page. That's it right there. This is the first div and this is the second div. As usual, a div being a block level element takes up full width of the container it's in. That's why they are stacked one on top of the other. Let's go put some content first. In the content box, I want us to have a heading, but a H2 level heading, which means a subheading. H1 is the main heading, while H2 refers to a subheading. Let's call this our pedigree of the company. Then a paragraph with some kind of dummy text. I already have some text I reserved for this. We'll paste it here. Then just include more dummy text like of 40 words. Go over to our web page now. You see it right there. So this is the first div inside of the about section, and this is the second div that has content. There's a content box div with content. The image box div, there's nothing in it right now because we've not placed our image element within it. Okay, this is what we have. So in our about section with two divs, the content box div already has content of a H2 and a paragraph, but our image box div does not have anything, no image within it. Let's go over to our code editor. So the image box is blank. Let's use the image tag to key in or impute an image. We're going to be using image2. If you go over to our web page now, that's a really big image. We don't want it to be this big. We can now style the image with a declaration to constrain its width. As you can see, the image is trespassing from its own div into the content box div. That's why there's an overlap right now. We're going to take care of this anomaly. We'll go over to our CSS and style the image. Dot about image means the image inside of the about section. Let's set its height to 100%. 100% means 100% of the container it's in, 100% of the div it's in. The div is already a height of 350 pixels. So the image by default will also be a height of 350 pixels because 100% of this is 350 pixels. That's what we have right there. So the image has now constrained itself because of this declaration we gave to it to 100% of its containing div in height. Alright. In order to have a bit of a bigger image, let's increase the height of our divs from 350 pixels to 400 pixels. Go over to our web page now, and the image is a bit bigger right now, just by 50 pixels. Good. Remember, we intend for these two divs to be side by side, not one on top of the other. What do we do to get these two divs to go side by side or sit side by side of each other like brothers or friends? That's right, we get to set the display of the parent element to a display property of flex. Good. Let's go over to our code editor, and these are the two divs. What's their parent element? This section with a class name of about. So let's go over, pick the dot about, and set its display property to flex. Go over to our web page. The two divs are now sitting side by side, no longer one on top of the other. So this is the image box div, and this is the content box div. Alright, based on their weight, there is still some blank space left. So we can play with that using FlexBox. We can play with this space. Remember our justify content property that helps us to space child elements of a flex container, or the space around property, or the justify content set. Remember all of that, right? You remember all of that, right? We're going to apply it in this case now. Before we start flexing our FlexBox stunts, I don't like the fact that our hero section and our about section are touching each other. There has to be some form of white space or separation between them. So we're going to set the margin property for our about section. Remember, margin takes care of external space around an element, while padding takes care of space within an element. Let's use the margin property now to give some spacing between the hero section and the about section. Over to the code editor. These are about section declarations. Let's set the margin to 80 pixels 0. Now there's some space between the hero section and the about section, but the space is too small. Let's increase it a bit from 80 pixels to say 120 pixels. That's more like it. All right, let's leave it this way, 120 pixels. What this declaration means is that, remember, if you set a margin or padding and you give two values like this, the first value represents top and bottom, while the second value represents left and right. So what this means is that we just set the margin top and margin bottom to 120 pixels, but we didn't set any margin for the left and right, which means margin left and right is 0. Margin top and bottom is 120 pixels. That's what we have here. That's why there's space here and there's space here, but there's no space to the left. There's space on the top and on the bottom, but there's no space to the left. This right hand side is just the fact that our two boxes do not fill up the rest of the space based on the fact that they are flex items inside the FlexBox parents. Now that we have the desired space between the hero section and about section, let's flex some stunts. Over to the code editor. We're going to set the justify content property of the parent element. In this case, I want the image box and the content box to have space between them. What do? We use justify content property, which sets horizontal, which works on the horizontal axis. Set justify content to space between and see what happens. Both boxes stretches to the far ends of the screen. If we set the justify content property to center, it overrides this and both of them are now in the middle of the screen. If, however, we set the justify content property to space around, spacing between them is greater than the spacing on the other side of each box. If you want the spacing to be equal, we set the justify content property to space evenly. We now have equal space to the right and to the left of each of the boxes, which makes a bit more sense like this, don't you think so? So we're going to leave the justify content property to space evenly so that our two boxes can be separate like this. So that means we'll take out all of these guys and leave the justify content space evenly property only. Let's turn our attention to the content in our content box. These are our H2 in our paragraph. I don't like the fact that they're just hanging at the top left corner. Let's give it a bit of some better representation by using CSS to control how they appear within the content box. We can either do a text align property to send our pedigree to the middle and also give some spacing with margin to push the paragraph down. Let's go over and do that. Okay, this is the H2 within our content box. Dot content box H2 text align center. That takes the subheading to the center. Now we want some space beneath it because it's too close to the paragraph. We'll set the margin bottom property. Let's give it margin bottom of 50 pixels. That push, oh, it's too much. Let's take it down to 24 pixels. That pushes the paragraph down a bit. Okay, this a bit, it's kind of presentable. All right, so we can now take out our borders. This is the border property. We can now delete it. Good. This is what we have. Our image box to the left and our content box to the right. For what it's worth, we're going to leave the about section as it is right now, having our image box to the left and the content box to the right with a bit of content, just giving a brief highlight about the company. And up here above it is the heroes section with a background image and some content overlaying it. We used a heading tag, a paragraph element, and an anchor tag we shaped in the form of a button that's clickable. All right, we're going to, at this point, draw the line for this particular episode. See you in the next episode where we would flex more stunts about the FlexBox model. See you right there.